Oh, hello. I'm Chris Vitali, and welcome back to part 2 of this special Roundhouse. We now pick up where we left off with Glendon Rusch, Kernan and Rocco Constantino, and we present to you Queens, Questions, and Quandaries.
A cakewalk for the remaining schedule for the Mets. But we did hear Luis Rojas come out and say, this time of year, we want to keep guys fresh. They're getting a little beat up. Just from that reaction, I have to hear what you have to say about that, Kevin.
Well, first of all, and you hear it in Glendon's voice when he's talking about this. I don't care what you say. Athletes are pretty much the same. But those athletes from that generation, his generation, and of course, anybody who's watched the 1986, Once Upon a Time in Queens, what those guys played through, I mean, come on. They had to tape up, Gary Carter had to tape his knees every game to play. They wouldn't let him anywhere near the field now. They're overprotective and they can't play. It's a freaking joke. It's a joke. You got to. If I was a manager, I would just roll the ball out there and say, "You guys play. You guys win this. I'll stay out of the way. I'll do Davy Johnson. All right. You have a good time, and I'll make the right moves. And if you don't like him, that's too bad. Like Strawberry being upset with Johnson when he got pulled out for a double switch in '86. So the game has become so. The players, I'm going to say it. They're soft. They're soft, and it's not their fault. They become soft because of what how this is so deep. We could do 10 shows on this, but I was talking to a scout the other day. He's been to 4 no-hitter. He's, I think 5, but there were 4 or 5 guys pitching no-hitters this year that he's been in minor league games, and every one of them were taken out at like 80 pitches with no-hitter. They don't know how to win anymore. They don't know how to compete. They can't go through it. Now, when I'm speaking in generalizations, so obviously there are players that know how to win. And those players, you look what the Giants are doing with those veteran players, Posey, Chris Bryant, those guys, Crawford, they know how to win. They know how to win. And every team that's in first place has those players that know how to win. The Rays are starting 2 pitchers tonight as we tape, both released by the Mariners within 5 minutes of each other a few years. And one guy was an independent ball. The other guy was selling solar panels. So these guys have a desire to win. The Rays connect to that. They make that part of their whole thing it's about the hunger inside a player as well. You watch a Rosarina, and he wants. They all want to beat you, and that's what that generation did. When Rojas and he's such a nice guy. I think he's too nice a guy, to be honest with you. When he first got hired, I spent 2 hours with him at a Starbucks in Port St. Lucie. Had a great time with him. And I thought he was going to be different. I really did. Felipe Alou is his dad. Nobody's tougher. Nobody went through more tough stuff than that. And I thought he would bring that. But I think they're all being, what's the word I'm looking at, contaminated by the nerds. So even the baseball guys can't be baseball guys. And this whole over-reliance of giving rest, let them play until they drop. That's what I say this time of year. It's got to be that simple. You go with your horses, and again, that 2000 World Series was a very good World Series. People forget about that, but those games were a lot closer than it looked throughout the whole series. And so you touched the nerve there, but it's too much. And this is why the Mets, with their talent, they should be ashamed of themselves the way they're playing this year. They really should. And if I was in that clubhouse, I would have no problem telling guys that. Are you kidding me? You're not even 500, and you're considering yourself a contender. You're not a contender. Get to 500 before you even get to be considered a contender. The Yankees, for all their problems, are like 18 games over 500.
Yeah.
So wake up, Mets, and stop it. And also, I'm holding the media accountable here too. The New York Mets, the Mets media. Let's go. Let's stop getting. Stop with the. Was it a rat or was it a raccoon? If I had been there, I would have told him, "Are you kidding me? What do you think? I'm an idiot? You were fighting with McNeil. Did you choke him? What did you do? I want to know what you did. That's the question. So
Correct.
I think, and Glendon lived through all this, so he knows real media and real ball players, and we're not seeing it right now.
I have a comment on that, Kevin. I wanted to ask you about this. You're the perfect guy to ask anyway. So over the last 2 years with COVID, that has created this complete separation and no ability to have a relationship with the media. So I think which in part has made it even worse too, right? So nobody's in the clubhouse. You guys, as from a media perspective, can't develop a relationship with me, or it's all Zoom interviews and everything else. And I think that part of it makes a difference too, because being held accountable, especially in New York or in Chicago, I played there too. You're held accountable by the media and by the fans and by the people who come out to watch you play. And I think, the way it is now, it's almost like they get a little, I don't want to say a pass, but it's different. It's different.
No, they get a pass. You're right. And again, I've been through it long enough. I used to do all my work at the batting cage many years ago. The batting cages really get your stories. You can talk to guys there. You can lean up. You can hang out with them, watch them hit. That's where you get. Then we got that taken away from us, and then we could no longer go to the batting cage unless you're the media that's actually presenting the game, like if it's on ESPN or whatever. To lose the clubhouse. And for the media not to be fighting to get back in the clubhouse now is terrible, because that's where exactly relationships and also guys could vent, players could vent, players could use the media to get things out and feel better about themselves, and also maybe solve some problems. I had many conversations with guys what they were doing wrong, and by the end of the conversation they said, I feel a little better now, and all that's lost, and the players think that this is better for them because probably some people up above are telling them that, but it's much worse for them. And you also, the other X factor here is you're getting players running amok in the clubhouse now. I bet you have more clubhouse fractions now than we know about than even before, because some guys are taking over clubhouses and think they don't stink. Nothing that they do stinks, and I think that's some of the problems too. I think the Mets have some clubhouse issues, to be quite frank. And, but if the media is in there every day, our hands are tied behind our back now. You can't do your job. And the Zoom, you don't even have to, if you give up, the great thing about baseball, I always said this about baseball and the difference between baseball and soccer and lacrosse. If your kid's playing soccer or lacrosse, somebody scores the winning goal or whatever, nobody knows what the hell happened. It just happened. But if you lose a game in baseball, that ball goes through your legs. Everybody knows, shortstop ball goes through your legs. And that's what's great about baseball. Those players are there every day at their locker speaking to us. And they grow tougher as a result of that. And they learn something about themselves. All that's gone now. If they don't want to come to the Zoom, they don't come to the Zoom. So I think, and who loses in the end? The fans lose in the end. The writers are still going to be able to write their stories. I joke with other writers. I said, you know what? I don't care if they never let me back in a clubhouse. I'll just write what I see. Who cares? We go back to the days before Dick Young. Dick Young, I think, was the first guy that really started pushing to go into clubhouses. In the old days, the writers just wrote, and they just who knows what the hell they wrote, but they weren't in clubhouses. And then for about 5 decades, we were in clubhouses, and everybody wins, but now they're out. And if they don't get back in the clubhouse, it's going to be a great loss to baseball, to fans, MLB, and the players.
I can tell you in 12 seasons in the big leagues, I don't remember anyone ever writing a thing about me that wasn't true, or that didn't cover the game that I was a part of in the right way, whether it be positive or negative. And that was because I had no problem standing up in front of my locker and talking to you and talking to your colleagues. And when I came up with Kansas City, Tim Belcher and Jeff Montgomery and those guys taught me, hey, when you hold yourself accountable, you stand in front of your locker after the game, good or bad, and you talk to the media, and that's part of your job. And I learned from the best, and the guys in New York told me the same, and I never had an issue.
And just the final point on that is that we learn, the media learns. Like, we may think that something happened, and we could be totally clueless, don't know why it happened, but then you'll explain it to us, and then there's been many times, hey, I just screwed up, I crapped the bed, okay, it happens, and it does, you're human, So those are the things that matter. Those are the things that are being lost. And I think starting with the commissioner, they want a barrier, and that barrier, they just want you to bet on games. They don't care about anything else anymore. They just want fans to bet on games. That's all they want now. Everything else is being lost. And in the end, if baseball doesn't clean it up, I think they're going to have a major problem. And I know one thing. I'm going to write what I see. And if you got a problem, you come talk to me, and I'll come talk to you. Quick story. I go to San Diego, 1988. Andy Hawkins comes up to me. And Andy goes, hey, first day in the clubhouse, he goes up to me in spring training in Yuma, Arizona, which is a trip in itself. And he goes, hey, I just want to let you know, we know where you came from. You came from New York. You're not going to pull any of that New York shit here. And I said, Andy, you don't have to worry about me. Worry about you pitching. You do your job. I'll do my job. And basically, it was a great conversation. And Andy and I got along great after that. So, but, we had to have that conversation. If you can't have that conversation, neither side trusts one another. And that's what I think the union needs to understand when it comes to the future. Because I think right now, the writers on a limited basis should be back in the clubhouse. No questions asked right now.
I mean, I have to agree with you. And before I go to Rocco, I actually have one quick question for you. Do you think that, I mean, the owners and the commissioner have to be happy with this, with the Zoom meetings, because they're just lobbing the players softball questions, and it's
for the most part, exactly. No, I agree with you. That's a huge part of it, and they're getting whatever message they want to get out there. They're getting out there. Whereas even one of my Cespedes, last spring training I was at with him, he said, "I'm not talking to you guys," and then I immediately went up to him, and the other guys came along too. The other Mets writers, they were good. And I said, what do you mean you're not talking to us? If you're not talking to us, you're not talking to the fans. So are you saying, can I quote you now saying you're not talking to the fans ever again? So you have those conversations, and my famous, you heard my famous, my thing with Thurman Munson when Thurman got on me right away too. But that's the way it is. You get tested and you move forward. And the other thing is, when you have those relationships, then you can tell some really interesting stories, and some fun stories and some human interest stories, and to show how hard this game is, because I think that's what people don't understand, how hard this game really is.
Oh, I agree. That's a perfect answer for that. And, I did want to ask Rocco,
Mm-hmm.
we kind of were going, with the Mets, and then got into media and what have you. But I mean, with what the media is portraying the Mets, what's going on with the Mets now, you have your thing with Rojas. Kevin just wrote a great piece about Theo Epstein, which we'll get to in a second. You see some things with Alderson. Today, Steve Cohen, the whole, Samson mess. So again, as a fan, I mean, what do you think when you see this, especially when you have a new owner, you have a new crew running the show? I mean, is this what you expected, or are you just like, oh God, maybe it's just a little spillover, or is it just not again, that kind of thing?
It's, for me, I mean, my own personal feeling is it's this not again thing, and it's disappointing because, with Steve Cohen, you're given new life, you think, at least anyway. The stigma of the Wilpons hanging over and same old Mets, you have optimism that that's going away. And then again, now you have this year with, like you mentioned, the raccoon thing, the thumbs down, Cohen, on Twitter, which I enjoy him on Twitter sometimes, but the stuff with Samson today, it's really that same old kind of stuff. And you're, it's weird because you watch the 86 Once Upon a Time in Queens, and there was, so much craziness going on, but the guys are out there fighting and winning. And, the kind of stuff that was happening at that point, it's a different era. So there's not that, media coverage, of social media, but, when you're winning, it's not same old Mets. If this year's team was out there 15 games ahead in first place and this other crap was going on, it's not so much a distraction. So it gets disappointing, and, it sucks to be the butt of jokes here and there. But, I guess my hopes are only that when they do win again, and I know that they will, that it'll be that much sweeter. But for now, yeah, it is frustrating to see that the same kind of crap went on this year that had gone on in previous years.
You almost use Willie Randolph's line there. When we sip this champagne, it'll taste that much sweeter.
There you go.
So I did want to ask, like I said, Kevin, you just wrote about Theo Epstein, and like you said, the time might be right, and the baseball guys might be smiling down on him. Glendon, I know you have some great stories about Theo, so I'll go around, Kevin. Some of your thoughts on this, and I mean, do you think he can help?
Well, first of all, Cohen. I've seen dangerous things with Cohen in that when he starts criticizing the players, when he starts to talk about hitting, he doesn't know anything about hitting. You know what? You got your 14 billion. Enjoy it. Don't get involved so much. He's gonna create a bad situation for his clubhouse, and he may lose some players as a result of that. He may not lose them physically; they may not go somewhere else, but he could lose them mentally, and he might lose some physically. So he's playing. He doesn't realize it, but he's playing with fire here because and Glendon will speak to this way better than I can as a player. But no player wants to put themselves in a situation where you have a owner going off the whatever. If he's going against the media, the hitters, or the fans, and he's trying to be a little bit of a smart guy, New York smart guy. Players don't want to deal with that. So Theo is so smart because he knows when to get out. Besides, he knows how to build a champion, but he knows how to get out. He got out of Boston. When Theo was 28 years old, around 20. No, I'm sorry, he was a little bit younger. He was in his mid-20s. He was assistant PR guy, and I was covering the Padres. And I told him one day, he hands me a press note after a game, and I said, "You know what? You're going to be a GM by the time you're 30." And he goes, "Kevin, you're crazy." I said, No, I can see how you get along with Lucchino. Lucchino loves to mentor people. He's going to make you a GM somewhere. And of course, look what happened in Boston. He goes to Boston with Lucchino, GM, boom. So having said that, Theo and I also have had our battles because we don't always agree on things. And early Theo was way too much analytical. Then later Theo started realizing, hey, the players can really help me. And what I mean by that is that former players could help him kind of give that perspective to him, which will make him a stronger GM. Kevin Towers taught him a lot too. So Kevin Towers was a good influence on Theo. So Theo, he goes to Chicago, they finish in last place, they get all the draft picks, boom, boom, boom. All of a sudden he's in a great spot. Javi Baez is drafted by the previous administration. So he gets to Chicago at the right time. Now he's out of Chicago. He breaks the curse. And there was some we'll talk about it in later shows, but a little bit like anything else in baseball, a little too much credit goes Theo's way sometimes, and maybe some blame, but some credit in Boston went his way for certain decisions that he maybe didn't have a lot to do with. But the bottom line is he was the GM, he broke that curse. He broke the curse in Chicago, got out of Chicago. Where does he go? He goes to New York. Everybody thinks he wants to be the next commissioner. He would love to be the next commissioner. But I think he's in New York because he wants to feel, he wants to get a feeling, he wants to keep an eye on what's going on with the Mets and stuff like that. He follows the money, which any smart guy would. If I was Jim, I want the owner with $14 billion. And then I can make my moves and I can cover up a mistake financially, kind of like the Yankees do all the time. So I think Theo is just out there waiting for the right moment. And the more you see it, the one thing I like best about Theo, and I said it in the column today, he's a competitor. We need a competitor in charge, especially with the Mets. You could see that everyone from those, and again, I hate to keep going back to 86, but that's what I dealt with those players through all those years. So it wasn't just the 86 Mets. That generation, they wanted to beat you, and they were competitors. We've lost that competitive factor because of the nerd factor by creating too many numbers for guys, too many iPads, instead of just going out and beating somebody. That's why we see so many 0-2 sliders being hit out of the park instead of a guy just saying, I'm throwing my fastball right past you. So Theo condensed it all together. He gets all this, I think, now. He understands New York. You can't question his credibility. And you need somebody that'll keep Cohen under control as I'm watching this thing develop. So if you bring in another milquetoast Jared Porter, when they hired him, I was like, Jared, who the hell is Jared Porter? Zach Scott? Who the hell is Zach Scott? These were lower level lieutenants that Theo had. And you need a guy with a big name a guy that can carry a big stick. And I can't think of anybody else out there now, other than if you take let me throw some other names at you. Say you take a Buck Showalter, and don't make him manager, but this is interesting. Make him GM. Now he may screw up, but he knows the game. So you need to have a heavy hitter as the Mets president of baseball operations. Sandy Alderson, another quick point. His son is now an assistant GM. So wouldn't it be convenient if Theo comes in and also can mentor Sandy's son? Wow, that's a nice combination too. So it's like anything else in life. You got to look at all the connections. I think the Mets should really pursue Theo. If they don't, they're making a big mistake.
Yeah, I tend to agree with you. And I mean, he might actually provide a nice buffer for the players between Cohen and the players. And, you have a guy in charge. Now, Glendon, you know Theo well. You had mentioned before we had started. I mean, do you see him possibly wanting to get involved and get his hands dirty and deal with the New York media?
As Kevin said, he's a competitor, and if you look at what he's done and his track record and built winners, it's a perfect fit. I mean, I think it's a perfect fit, and he has a really good sense of what Kevin just talked about early on, heavy on the analytics side, maybe a little too heavy, even in his own admission. Then started to marry in the baseball guys, and you get the uniform personnel, former players. And not only does that help, I think, from just an overall perspective, but I think it also helps from a communication to the guys on the field perspective. So those 25 guys then feel comfortable if, in Chicago, as an example, if they get to talk to Ryan Dempster or Kerry Wood or Ryan Sandberg or Fergie Jenkins or all these guys that are around, right, as helpers and special assistants, there's a sense of trust there, and I think there's a lot of organizations now where there's maybe not a lot of communication or a lot of trust when it comes from the 25 guys on the field to the guys in the front office. They're getting handed a bunch of numbers or an iPad or stuff they should be working on. But the power of persuasion, this is a quote from one of my favorite pitching coaches I've ever had, is a really positive thing. And if that persuasion is coming from somebody that has your back and you can trust, that's a huge part of. Man, I'll tell you what, Dusty Baker, for me, when he was my manager, he made me feel like I was Randy Johnson when I was going to the mound. And it had nothing to do with my stuff, had nothing to do with my curveball or changeup. It had to do with, hey, G, I know you're going to go out and pitch well tonight. That was it. Bobby V was the same way with me. He gave me an opportunity, had confidence in me. That made me a better pitcher, no doubt about it.
I want to interrupt real quick with a quick question because I want his opinion. I'm watching the Yankees the other day against the Twins. The Yankees are winning late in the game, but they're coming back. The Twins are going to a bullpen game. They got a pitcher on the mound who is struggling a little bit. He gives up a leadoff hit. Then he gets 2 outs, 2 fly balls in the 8th inning. So he's almost out of it. Brett Gardner's coming up. What happens? The little pitching coach comes to the mound, talks to him. Next thing you know, it's a 4-pitch walk. What the hell are these iPad pitching coaches coming to the mound, talking to a pitcher when he just got 2 tough outs? He got LeMahieu and somebody else. If you were on the mound and that guy came out, what would you be saying? Like, get the hell out of here. What are you doing?
Yes. Save the visit. Yeah. A lot of it doesn't make sense. And I can go through a whole, watching from afar now and paying attention to what's going on. My biggest issue probably on the pitching side is lack of starter use and depth, which then in turn hammers your bullpen. And whether you think you can shuffle guys in and out to make up for fresh arms, that takes away cohesiveness in the bullpen, right? Mm-hmm. The guys that are there all year. And if you've got 7 or 8 guys in the pen that are healthy, they should be there all year if they're performing well. If they're not performing well, obviously you make a move. But it drives me crazy to see teams now that are in contention and they're looking around going, our bullpen's shot. And it's like, well, that's your own fault. They put themselves in that position in June and July to where you're looking up and we're having to push guys hard now. It's like, no, they should be ready to be pushed hard now because they should have had proper rest and been used properly back in the earlier parts of the year. That's my opinion.
That's a brilliant point, and I will bring up something I asked one of Bruce Bochy's bullpen guys in their famous run when they went 3 and 5 years, which I predicted, by the way. That's another story. But I asked one of the bullpen guys in San Francisco, I said, what makes Bochy special for you guys? How are you going to be able to win your third World Series? And he said, in July, he starts using us the way we know we're going to be used throughout the playoffs. We know everybody knows their job. We can lean on each other. We have trust in each other, and we're ready to go. Starting with July, he maybe leans back a little bit until July, but come July, we start to put it in gear, and then we know we can trust each other and who we got. That's exactly, I think, what you're saying, and all that's been lost by the gobbledygook of whoever they bring in and they call up and they say, yeah, and you know the worst thing now, you pitch well, you come up from the minor leagues, you pitch well, and then you get set right back down again because they need somebody else to eat some innings.
Yeah, I mean, you're seeing that. You're seeing that with the Yankees. I mean, Glendon brought up a great point. I mean, Chad Green, who was one of the most dependable guys when he got some rest. You got starters going 4 or 5 innings. He's coming in every game. He's giving up home runs. He's like he's throwing BP out there. You got Andrew Heaney pitching out of the Yankees bullpen. Who's a fly ball pitcher. Great, yeah, let's throw him in a Yankee Stadium. He's a lefty. That's real smart. And, but that's like you said, I mean, these guys are gassed by July, and I get dead arm period, and I get that, but that's not this. These guys are gassed. And like Kevin just said, you know what? Like you pitch well, you get sent back down, so you can bring up somebody else. And it's just the bullpen mismanagement is a league-wide problem, and and
they're all driveline guys too.
It's infuriating. They're these driveline guys.
It's driveline, and nothing against driveline or any of these.
No.
Where you can actually get a certificate and become a coach, as opposed to being Glendon Rusch, who pitches in the major leagues and understands what coaching is all about. That's what I'm talking.
Yeah, and most of it's communication and understanding your players, and from being a bullpen coach, understanding those 8 guys, what they need to be ready, also being honest when they need a break, right? And the other part that's crazy is, Kevin, you mentioned earlier, which makes sense for a team that's out of contention, right? Minnesota bullpen game. I see teams that are in contention down the stretch right now having bullpen games like once a week. That's crazy to me. How do you not have somebody in the minor leagues or whoever sign a veteran guy that can come out and be a spot starter for you? That drives me nuts. And it's nothing against the fact that the bullpen has to go out there and do it, but you ask those guys 2 and 3 days after that, none of them are feeling great about it. They're tired.
It catches up to them, and the Rays somehow magically do it now. But they've gone through, and I think the number I just saw was 39 or 40 pitchers already this year. It's going to catch up to them.
Yeah.
No, I agree. I mean, it's Rocco. What's your take on this? I mean, I know you love, complaining about pitchers not going deep into games. I love when you start getting pissed off about that because it's hysterical. So, just a little something about bullpens, Rocco style.
I'll keep it short. I interviewed also, besides Glendon today, Dave LeManchik, who pitched in the 70s for the Tigers. And he said it great. He said they've taken the finish line away from pitchers, starting pitchers. Starting pitchers used to go out there with the mentality, I'm going to the 9th inning. That's my finish line. And you went after it like a thoroughbred. Now they've taken that away. Are you going to pitch 5 innings or 6 or three times through the order or 2? And that finish line is gone. Pitchers aren't thoroughbreds anymore. And it's created a whole domino effect of tired bullpens, guys shuffling back and forth. And that was awesome. He said it, like I said, lean on the guys who've been there. I couldn't put it any better myself. I thought that was really cool.
That's fantastic. I mean, just real quick before we start wrapping up with all these pitchers, I mean, now these guys are, the rosters are expanded to 28 because they don't do the 40 anymore. And these guys have 15, 16 pitchers, that they're still moving guys around, and that affects the bench. No team has a deep bench. You still have 3 guys on your bench. What the hell is that? I mean, that's not, something's inherently wrong. If you're willing to screw yourself out of options off of your bench, pinch hitting, pinch running, defensive replacement, whatever it is, something's wrong in the pitching department. I'm sorry.
That like newer generation of third time through the lineup stuff is, look, there's numbers that support it at times, but there's also a lot of other numbers that don't show up on paper that are going to kill your bullpen, and that's what's going to happen. And so let your starters battle through. I mean, I was a fifth starter, a spot starter at times, but my finish line might not have been the ninth, but it was like at least the seventh, right? I was trying to get my team in the sixth or seventh inning every time I could with the lead to then hand it to your seventh, eighth inning guys, right? And then have a good closer. And that formula still wins. I don't care who you are. I don't care how long it's going to go on for. That formula wins, because if you've got, back in our era, if you look at the Yankees, it was Stanton, Nelson to Rivera, right? Or in our bullpen, it was Turk Wendell, Dennis Cook, and Johnny Franco getting to Armando Benitez. I mean, those are pretty damn good relievers, and they were going to win ball games for you when you had the lead. And all these teams have that capability now, but it gets mishmashed and who knows what and what's role. And hey, now we need our closer to get 5 outs. That stuff kills you. I'm telling you, once you start picking away at that stuff kills you, and eventually it catches up.
I agree. I mean, Kevin, what do you, just one last thing on this before we go around and.
Well, the thing that happens most, and I alluded to it earlier, because I had predicted this about 6 years ago once I saw what was going on in the minor leagues. But when you start taking out guys with no hitters and they accept it, then you got a problem. And it's because the other thing that I hate most of all is that I've seen many pitchers, the David Cohns of the world, and I love David, but he's really into these analytics too right now and what he's talking about. But I remember so many starting pitchers maybe struggle a little bit, but then they get better as time goes on. They're stronger later in the game than they were in the middle of the game. They don't have that opportunity anymore. And I love what Rocco just said about the finish line. The finish line has been taken away from them. They used to be able to look for the finish line. Now, if you struggle a little bit, you're out. Again, it's only been 86, but that one game in Houston, what was it? Doc went 10 innings, right? And I talk to Doc about this all the time. And he a guy like Doc Gooden, who's been through so much, don't you think the Mets should have him in to talk to the pitchers? They don't even do that, So these. And again, I know I've become the poster child for it, but that's why nerds have ruined baseball. Over nerding, you keep these guys in the corner. You let them get Mountain Dew and get their little Uber Eats. Let them throw numbers at you. Use the numbers properly, but don't let them make these big decisions. Let them decide. They can switch out on Uber Eats each day and make their, put it all together. But don't let them decide to ruin pitching staffs like they've done time and time again.
There's so many decisions that are made that are unpredictable because of the human element, and whether the guy's feeling good that day, not feeling good, has it, doesn't have it, whatever. All that stuff makes such a big difference. And yeah, there needs to be a better combination of those two. The analytics have a place in the game, no doubt about it. But I think
I agree with that. Analytics have a place.
Yeah,
but they're not center stage. Please don't put them center stage. And we see where the game is going unless somebody stands up to it. That's why I think, you get, like, if you listen to a game too with the Mets and you hear some of the things you hear what Keith and Ronnie don't say, and even David too. When I listen to Yankee games. When David doesn't say something, you hear a sigh, like, oh, because they can't believe what they see that's going out in front of them. And pretty soon, I won't be writing, and I'll just fade away, and there'll be somebody else that's coming in that's can really, read a player's tweets and can dig up some stats, and they'll be calling themselves a baseball writer, having never talked to a baseball player really at length and understanding it. That's where we're heading. But you know what happens? Every year, almost in the World Series, the team that wins the World Series goes old school at some point, and they win the World Series.
Great point.
That is true. I mean, do you guys think that the human element that is so desperately needed is going to make a comeback anytime soon? Do you think we're finally hitting something here? Because we are seeing more and more retired players. We are hearing more guys, that are analysts and guys doing the games that are finally like, come on, man, just play the damn game. Just play the game that we are all here to watch and that you are on the field getting paid to play. Do you think we're going to see a little bit of a shift back in what I like to think is the right direction, Glendon?
I hope so. I hope there is, and you can't blame any of what's going on with the players really either, because that's how we trained them. I mean, I did 3 years in the minor leagues with the Padres. We trained our pitchers that way. We trained our pitchers to go 75 pitches, and winning a game didn't mean anything. It was all about development, right? Well, part of being a winner is development too, and I had a strong opinion on that, and got a lot of pushback on it at times, but I hope it does, and I hope we see more some shift back into some more older school fundamental type baseball, especially on the offensive side. How many guys are we going to see hit 30 or 40 home runs that aren't going to drive in 100 runs? That used to be a benchmark, right? Where it's like hit 30, drive in 100. There was a lot of guys that did that, and now we see guys hitting 35 and they've driven in 65.
Yeah,
and part of that's the strikeouts and everything else, the on base that surrounds it, is it's not there. Some of it.
No, I agree with you, Kevin. Do you think we're going to see a little something, a little pushback?
Well, what scares me most of all is the fact that I'm seeing a lot of good baseball people and players I knew, older now, of course. They're taking jobs in colleges because baseball won't let them into Major League Baseball because they do have their driveline guys and whatever. So I think it's getting worse, not better. And unless somebody stands up to it, and it's going to take in the playoffs. And what a great point Glendon just made about the Padres. I mean, you could see that developing. And let's crystallize it. And again, I love everything the Rays do for the most part, and they have great development people. But they take out a guy who's cruising in the World Series, and they lose the World Series report. There's ramifications for all these bad moves. The problem is you have so many of these GMs now who all think alike. They will continue to do this. And because they've all created crappy teams and it's all mediocre, somebody will win and they'll think, oh, that's brilliant. And then we'll have all the writers jumping on the bandwagon. Oh, look at this. This is the new way that's coming. When it's reality, the reality is not. And like the much like in real life, how the goalposts keep moving for us, and, in real life with the things going on, the goalposts keep moving in baseball. I want to see baseball. That's why I'm rooting like hell for Tony La Russa and the White Sox. I want to see La Russa win, bring some old school back, Joe McEwing, those kind of guys. And I think a little start of it may be if baseball really takes a hard look, instead of sending out dumb tweets, Steve Cohen, watch Once Upon a Time in Queens and see the kind of players they got, how they developed those players, what the coaching staff meant, a guy like Bill Robinson meant to that team. And do that. Don't worry about who's giving information to reporters.
I love it. Rocco, same question.
No, I hope so. You never know. You just hope that it's that copycat thing. And I thought one of the good things about the Mets losing that World Series to the Royals was, Royals are more of a defense, speed, small ball type of team. And, teams would copy that, but they really haven't. Who knows? It's hard to say what direction the sport will go.
No, I agree with all of you, and I sure hope it goes in that direction too. So it is now time for us to go around and get everybody's final thought. And I'm going to do a little bit differently, I think, this time around. And I'm going to ask a somewhat controversial question. I'm going to start with Kevin Kernan.
No.
In the American League MVP race, do you think if Vlad Guerrero wins the Triple Crown, he should win it over Shohei Ohtani?
No, that's a great question, and I've been thinking about this week. Triple Crowns are special, but they've like everything else, they've They devalued it. But I will say this, Ohtani, just for the entertainment factor, I could see how people would vote him. If I had an MVP vote this year, which I don't, but if I had one, I would probably swing it to Ohtani simply because what he is doing is so unique. And, it's Babe Ruth. It's not as successful as Babe Ruth, and he's got the juice ball and there's all these other things. One thing I didn't like about Ohtani, all the buildup in New York, that game he's pitching against the Yankees, couldn't make it out of the first inning. That was kind of revealing to me. And I love Vlad Guerrero. Not only is he doing all these Triple Crown things, but he's hitting the ball the other way. He's taking what the defense gives him. And I was talking to an evaluator about that 2 days ago, and I was going to write about it. The Theo thing came into my head. When your best player does that, your whole team follows along. So, Guerrero, some of the best players in the game right now, their dads were in the game and they taught them the right way. Their dads weren't nerds. I'll leave it with that. Their dads were not nerds. Their dads taught them baseball. And like I said, I give Ohtani the vote only because it's so special what he's doing. But I have so much respect for Guerrero. And maybe Guerrero, if their pitching comes together, that team could be dangerous and could really shock people. Maybe he'll come out with at least a visit to the World Series.
I like it. I'm gonna go to Rocco next because I know you were talking about this earlier. Same question.
Yeah, I've been going so back and forth on it, and I don't even think it depends is dependent on the Triple Crown. I'm more dependent on playoffs. And if the Blue Jays make the playoffs, if I was, ever to have a vote, that might be the deciding factor with me. And also for me too, I looked it up today when we were talking. Vlad's been he's batting right around 300 since August 1st. Ohtani's batting average since that same time is under 200. He's batting 198. So if Vlad's finishing strong and carries that team to the playoffs, I think I'd end up voting for Vlad. If he didn't, I'd probably go Ohtani because, like Kevin said, nobody in the world can do this and really has ever done this. So it's really unique in what we're seeing. Two incredible players. I'm kind of glad I don't have to choose between one or two officially, but for our sake, I'd go Vlad right now, just based on that. Ohtani's really struggled at the plate since August 1st.
All right, and Glendon Rusch, I gotta ask you too.
This is the worst question.
I know.
I'm miffed by this one. If you had asked me 6 weeks ago, I would have given Ohtani 10 votes.
Same.
But I tell you what Kevin said is very valuable. What Rocco said about Vlad Jr. I mean, he is. It would be tough not to vote for him if I had a vote. So I'm not going to give you a definitive answer. I'm completely up in the air. I'm like 51-49 Shohei, but Vlad is swinging me the other way big time.
Let me just add, if I were a writer in Toronto, I would vote for Vlad. If I were a writer anywhere else in the United States, I'd vote for Ohtani.
That's fair.
Yeah.
Fair. I mean, I guess if I had to choose, look, Vlad has a superior cast of characters around him in that lineup. That's for sure. I mean, it's Ohtani doesn't have that kind of protection in the lineup. Trout hasn't played in I don't know how long. Rendon is anytime I go to an Angels game, he's not playing. You got the guy, the what's his name? Walsh. Looks like Forrest Gump after he's been running. But I think it is dependent. I think if Vlad wins the Triple Crown, it's going to be a 1A, 1B thing. And I'm going to really cheat, and I'm going to say co-MVPs like they did years ago. But because I don't know how the hell I'd have to make that decision.
Isn't it funny they end up in a situation like we've had all these debates over the years with Trout because they've been kind of in the same situation, right? Where it's like this guy's clearly the best, 1A or 1B best player in the league, but they don't play well as a team and they haven't made the playoffs and they haven't had pitching. And yeah, it's crazy. We're having that debate again about a guy that is doing something that nobody's ever seen. I've never seen it. It's unbelievable. what he's done. But that what Rocco brought up too, the hitting, around 200 or under 200 over the last since June or whatever, that's a big part of it too.
Yeah.
That tells me that they picked up something in his swing and attacking him a different way, and so maybe he's not as good a hitter as we think.
Yeah, league always adjusts, and then you got to adjust back.
Right.
That's true. And there's one thing that a lot of people out here, in California do say about the Angels. It's like they can throw up MVPs at you anytime, but the valuable part, the Angels would still suck without them. So that's kind of the word around on the street here in California. But that is going to bring us to Rocco Constantino, our ombudsman, who likes to tell us what we screwed up. And I'm sure I botched a couple things. I don't know about these other guys, but
Now I got two verifications here. Kevin brought up a good point with Piazza making an error to give that first run in the 9-11 game. Actually, Ken Caminetti hit a double, and Piazza botched the throw at home, and the run scored. That was really interesting. I forgot Ken Caminetti was involved in that game. And then, yes, it was the Danny Almonte year in 2001. He, claiming he's 12, but he was really 14. So right on the money with that as usual.
Some of the wires are still connected up there, Kev. You're good.
Not many. You got me early in the day.
Yeah.
oh, God.
Man, I tell you what, my memory is mine's going. I'm pushing 47, and I got to go back all the time and look up box scores, and because I don't want to be the old dude telling my kids and the guys on their team all these stories, and they look it up and they're like, wait, he wasn't even in that game,
Well, that's
take Rocco with you everywhere. That's all.
And that's a great point. The great point you made earlier, I thought, was about the how you guys getting on the field together and kind of jogging each other's memories. And again, bringing everything back to Once Upon a Time in Queens. That's what's happened with that story. You could tell when those guys started telling stories, it jogged each other's memory about what really happened. And we love to hear those. That's what we love about baseball. Yeah. And that's what people need to remember. And I thought for sure that Rocco was going to crush me today because I was throwing out a lot of stuff.
That was good. Hey, one of my for the people who haven't seen it yet, one of my favorite quotes in the documentary was from Chuck D when he said, "New York was social media before there was social media."
Great point.
That's great. That's excellent. That is great. Well, listen, fellas, I want to say thank you. Thank you, Glendon, Kevin Kernan, Robert Constantino. I'm Chris Vitali. This has been Roundhouse, and we'll be back soon. Thank you. Adios.
See you guys.